Hey everybody, it's Peter, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about the ZX-4R, and we're going to compare it to the Ninja 650. So these are different bikes, and this is actually the third video I've done on the ZX-4R. In the first one we compared the 4R and the 4RR. Really that was our introduction to the actual production bikes. We also compared it within the Super Sport lineup, doing the ZX-4R, ZX-6R, and ZX-10R. But I think this is going to be the most interesting one because nobody is cross-shopping, or very few people are cross-shopping a ZX-10R with a ZX-4R, but these two bikes are both the same price, and there's been some talk about engine versus engine, bike versus bike, and where I think this video is going to be interesting is I go in depth, I go into the details, and we can really start to see the detailed differences between these two bikes to help you decide at least where Kawasaki is aiming these, and also maybe where it fits in the marketplace as far as who's going to be the driver of this one versus that one, if there's overlap and where there's not overlap. So this is going to be pretty in-depth, but I think this one, like I said, is going to be one of the most interesting ones. So I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, and they give me complete access to the entire vehicle lineup, and that means that if you have questions about either of these bikes, I can come back to those questions both in the comments section and in future videos. And that's part of what we're addressing today, is some of the comments that you guys have had about this brand new bike, and again, this one as well. So make sure you subscribe, let me know in the comments what you want to know, and we'll continue to build sort of a video database of information to make sure that you have all the information you need. And of course, if you want to come check these out, this is Canada's #1 volume Kawasaki dealer. This is absolutely the best place to get a Kawasaki in the country. I really mean that. All right, let's get going with the review. So the first thing I want to address with these two is seating position, and both of these are very good, but they're good for the class. So first of all, this is a road-going bike, so you have a little bit more of a road-going position. Putting my leg up here, this is also a longer bike. You have a little bit more space in this bike. It's, you know, not quite as compact as the other one, but you can see my riding position is very upright. So the other one is also upright. We're going to show it to you in 1 second, but a couple key differences here is my hands, I think, are a little out as opposed to a little further back. And the more relaxed position you get, if you go to something like the Versus 650, you're kind of up like this. The more sport position you get, the more lower and down like that you are. So this one here is very good for a comfortable road position. And to be fair, it's probably got a little bit cushier seat. It's definitely got a better rear passenger seat. If you're taking passengers, this is the bike to take them on. It's legal on the other one. It's more comfortable on this one. And of course, you can get things like a top case and a backrest if you were thinking about taking this for a long, long trip. For a long trip, this one is more comfortable. There's no question about it. Let's compare it right now directly to the ZX-4R. So what I'll try to do is line it up, but it won't be exactly because the bikes are different frames, different size. We'll try to show you exactly what it's like right here, and you'll sort of see the fade from one to the other. So again, these bikes are not the same size. I'm not sure how that transition went exactly. I won't know until I do the editing. But like I said, you're a little bit further over here, leaned more in. I do think that the handlebars are a little bit more curled towards you, but they're not as curled towards you as some. For a super sport bike, this is the most comfortable super sport bike I've been on, and that's because, again, super sport would be more track focused. A lot of track focused bikes, you're really down here. This one, you're up here. So it's not going to be as good of a touring bike as the Ninja 650 for sure, but most day, all day comfort, you're in that range. Maybe not all day comfort, you probably have to stop a few more times, but on a bike like this, you probably would. But again, more weight on your wrists, but not nearly as much as a super sport. By far the most comfortable superbike sport I've sat on. By far not as comfortable as the 650. 650 is going to be more comfortable for all day tours. So let's get the riding position out of the way and talk about a few performance differences that are really important as well. So if we're going to talk performance and we're not talking about purely horsepower or torque, we have to start looking right here because this tells a whole story. Tires, brakes, suspension. That is a massive piece of any bike's performance. And like the Ninja 400, not the ZX-4R, the Ninja 400 and the Ninja 650 are in some ways built to a price point. They're designed for a certain level of comfort, and that will take away some of their on-track performance. So first thing you have right here is right side up forks. You'll have upside down forks on the ZX-4R, which we'll show you in a second, which again, kind of a budget type thing. They are less expensive to make, but again, for what you need on the road, these are absolutely perfect. If you see people take these to the track as their only track bike, they will eventually update the fork for track purposes. Now, keep in mind, once you get a track-focused bike, it becomes less of a road bike. So this is, again, perfectly fine for the road. The other thing you're going to see down here is these pedal-style rotors. We've sort of figured out that these pedal-style rotors, they used to be talked about for ventilation. They have the in and out at the bottom there. The reality is these are probably more style than anything else. It's the drilled rotors that make a difference. And you're going to see the way this caliper is mounted on here. Just take a look at that because you'll see a difference in the way that the ZX-4R is mounted and a little bit less braking surface area. Now you still have dual discs, you have very, very good braking and ABS braking on here. The one piece of this bike that's actually a little bit interesting to me that actually has more performance here is these are the Dunlop Road Sport 2 tires. In theory, this is one step up from the tires on the ZX-4R. So we're going to show you those tires right here, but just remember, right side up forks, this style of brake, and a little bit better tire in theory than on the ZX-4. Let's jump over to that bike right now. So ZX-4R, right away you can see the upside down forks. What this does is give you less unsprung weight. Unsprung weight allows for better tuning in the suspension, and when you're talking about lap times and getting that split second difference, that's where this is going to make a little bit of a difference. You can tune these, they are adjustable, which is another thing that the that the Ninja 650 do not have adjustable forks. So between being adjustable and giving you a little bit less unsprung weight, that's a more performance oriented thing. And then you can see the brakes over here. They are radial mounts, so they mount in like this and like that, and they have definitely more surface area on the discs. So that, of course, is going to be a higher performance braking. We know that those pedals are probably more style than anything else, so we see, the drilled rotors here, probably a little bit larger drilled holes, certainly a little bit more dense drilling of those holes. Again, that's to manage heat. Braking is all about managing heat. ABS brakes on both, and I should mention the tires here. When I say they're not quite up to snuff, they're fine. They are the Sport Max, I can't remember the name of it, but the one step down of the from the Road Sport 2. And these ones are still used on, for instance, my 950cc Z900 RS SE. So they are perfectly capable tires. However, it is interesting that they are one step down in the Dunlop line from the 650. So everything else here is more performance, except you can make the argument about the tires being a little bit of a step down there. Other than that, this bike has high quality stuff throughout, so let's keep rolling through. So we've talked about brakes, we've talked about suspension, we've talked about some of the functional differences in the engine, but let's talk about how that all translates to riding before we start taking a look at some of the electronics where you really see some differences and variations here as well. This bike here is a two-cylinder 650cc engine, and like we said, forgetting horsepower and torque numbers for a second, let's talk about how it rides. With this engine, I like to call it one of the most perfect road sport engines. It's peppy, it gives you that good torque down low, and of course it revs out to, I think it's around 11.5, somewhere in that range. So you have that nice spread of power, but that torquiness down low is that pushing power down low. Low end torque is very, very useful on the road. When you're on a racetrack, you're going to be working in your higher gears all the time, and that's why this one can rev out to 16,000 RPM. The design of this engine is different. So you have 4 cylinders traveling a very short distance, and they make up only 400 cc. So what you have here is a faster revving engine. People ask me all the time which one is faster. Well, unrestricted, when this one doesn't have that sort of restriction due to the noise regulations, this one is absolutely going to be faster. Restricted, that'll kind of depend. That'll be an interesting thing to look at because this one doesn't have the torque. So where this makes power is up high in the rev range, which is a lot of fun to ride. Zipping around stoplight to stoplight, this will absolutely work. But when you have fun on this bike, you've got it revving high. Up high in that rev range with a quick revving engine, this is going to be quicker. Adding the quick shifter is also going to give you an advantage in being in the right gear because it quick shifts up and down without having to use the clutch. You can stay on the throttle when you're upshifting, that kind of thing. So that makes this a little bit more race oriented. And without a doubt, this is going to be a quicker bike on a racetrack because you're keeping it in those high revs. You're zipping through potentially a quick shifter if you add that as an accessory. And then you've got the little bit better suspension and a little bit better brakes where you can brake a little later, get on the throttle a little earlier. But the way this one drives is in those high revs, and what's cool about it is because it doesn't make obscene amounts of power, you can drive it on the road and feel like that race bike. The way this one rides is much more of a traditional, almost a little bit closer to the way cars work. If you think about a Porsche, the torque and horsepower are sort of balanced in those cars, and that would be more of a balance in this bike between the torque and the horsepower. So still very quick, still lots of fun, but a little less agile because of the extra weight, a little less precise because you can't dial in the suspension. Now, if you're not going to dial in suspension, that may not matter to you. It also is a little bit more comfortable because race-focused things, if race is your priority, you're going to lose comfort. There's just no way around that. So that's how the engines operate. Now let's look at some of the electronics in these that also will tweak how they ride and why one is better for instance, the racetrack, and one might be better for the road. Let's zoom in. So looking at the Ninja 650, let's take a look at just the overall surround here. Because you don't have a ram air intake coming through the bodywork, you've got extra room for something like this. This right now is a dummy plug. There's nothing there, but it's set up for you to add a 12-volt port so you could power something like maybe a GPS device. Now, the ZX-4R also has a 12-volt accessory, although to me, it doesn't appear to be mounted in the dash. It appears to be mounted somewhere else, so you'd have to run some wires underneath to get it up to this area if you had a GPS or something like that. Both are capable, but of course this one's just sort of set up from the factory for what you might use it for if you were doing some touring. The other thing worth noting is from the factory, you can get a larger windshield that gives you a little bit more coverage. Again, a little more touring oriented. Filming screens is never an easy thing to do. You know, they always show a little more glare in person, but you can see what this one is. I have this one set up with the white background. You can invert this. Let's just zoom right in. You can invert this to go everything that's white is black and everything that's black is white, but the other one is already set up for the black side, so you'll see that in a second. Basically, you have the same general information here. You have some fuel efficiency numbers, trip A, trip B, odometer, temperature, clock. You've got your revs. So again, I was wrong about the rev. This one revs to 10,000 RPM red line. But again, you're making your power in that mid-range to the upper range. You've still got good torque down to that 4,000 RPM, for instance. So that's kind of how this one works. For 2023, you've added cruise control to this bike, or I'm not sure if it's 2023, but yeah, very recently you've added cruise control to this bike, or not cruise control, excuse me, traction control, using the wrong control. So you have traction control here. You have the gear indicator. Now let's talk really briefly about traction control. This one only has one power mode. There's no high power or low power mode. And with traction control, you can kind of control in things like if it's a rainy area, you can increase the traction control to a level 2. If you want to turn it off and do wheelies, you can do that as well. So level 1, level 2, and nothing else, but no rider modes on this one. So it's just the traction control that you're adjusting. Everything as far as performance is determined by your right wrist and spinning that up. Now let's take a look at basically the same dash, but adding functionality for a race bike into the ZX-4R. So taking a look at the ZX-4R, same basic thing here. So this area here is not an area where you're going to be able to add a 12-volt port. It's not designed for it, it's not set up for it, and you can probably see on camera there, yeah, it says RAM air system. So what that means is air is coming through the very center of this bike, and it's brought through the bodywork around here into the engine. That is going to help with high-speed performance, high-speed giving you energy, that kind of thing, or yeah, horsepower, that kind of thing. Down here you have just a better quality suspension. These ones aren't adjustable right here from the top. If you have the ZX-RR, they're adjustable from the top there. But again, more adjustments in the suspension, more fine-tuning ability on this bike than on the Ninja 650. And of course, your bars are a little lower here, whereas the 650 comes up and out. These ones are basically coming off the triple clamp. Now there's different geometry to this bike, so again, harder to see some of the exact differences. Let's turn the bike on. We're going to zoom into the screen here, and we're going to play with this just a little tiny bit to show you what we've got. So again, inverted colors here. You can get the same look with the other bike there with the white and black, and the black is white. This one, of course, revs to the 16,000 RPM red line, and you could do cool things on both these bikes. If you wanted it to start flashing at you at, say, 10,000 RPM to tell you to shift, you could set that up and customize that RPM range that you want to. The one difference here is you're not going to see a traction control label. You're going to see a rider mode. Now, there are various levels of rider modes in Kawasaki. There's almost always, when it has rider modes, you have sport, like you see it there. You have road there, and then you have a rain mode here. Now, where things get interesting is this bike also adds a rider mode. So we're going to talk about a rider mode. Basically, the rider mode it shows you here that the power is F. That means full, and the traction control is 1. So the rider mode can be customized up. If you wanted to go full power and level 1 or full power and level 2 traction control, you could do that, because sport mode is essentially full power and level 1 traction control. If you wanted to go full power and traction control off, you can do that. If you're just learning, you can go with a low power mode and full traction control, which is essentially rain mode, but you could do full or low power and less traction control. So you can customize here with the rider mode your power and your traction control. Adjusting that power mode is only available here on this this bike with the rider mode that you don't have in the other one. So we're going to bring it back up to sport for a second, just because I want to leave it in sport as we go to the next level over here. So I'm going to reach around, hopefully not be too much in your screen here. We're going to hold both these buttons down together, and when we do that, you're going to enter into a vehicle display settings, essentially. So hopefully you can still see it clearly there. Try to get it focused on. Yeah, it's working to get a little bit clearer. All right, so we're going to go down to the display. We're going to select that. We're going to see the type. So let's select that as well. And then we're going to go down to type 2. And then the quickest way I found, maybe I'm wrong, you guys can correct me in the comments, is just turn it back off and turn it on again. There's probably a way to exit the menu, but again, every bike's a little bit different. Oh, you know what? I didn't set it up right. So let's try that again here. All right, I apologize that I just edited out me going back in. I didn't actually select it properly. So there we go. So this dash is not available in something like the Ninja 650. So you can see that the tack is totally different here. You have a huge lap timer up front. You still have your gear indicator there, and your speed is actually smaller than your lap. Your lap timer right there. The very bottom in blue, let's just see if we can zoom in even more. You can see the best lap time right in there at the bottom there, so you can set all these kinds of things up. You still see your sport mode, so you can tell if you're in sport mode or rider mode. If you're low on fuel, it's going to give you not a fuel gauge, but it's going to give you that the warning light like it's up right there. So this is kind of everything you need in here. Now, one thing worth pointing out is if you add a quick shifter to this bike, I would go with the factory quick shifter. Let me just zoom out a tiny bit here, because the factory quick shifter will also give you the label in here that you can be turning it on or off. So if you want to use this bike without a quick shifter, you can. If you want to use it with the quick shifter, you can as well. But this is, again, a little bit extra performance thing where you can just set that lap. You've got a button on your handlebar to set the lap every time. And if you're taking it to the track, this one obviously is set up for that. So I'm just going to freehand a few other little differences that might make a difference to you, and we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of each. So as we walk around to the Ninja 650, one of the key differences you're going to find is rubber on the foot pegs, and this one actually has a weight down low. Some of the 650s are going to have that. The 650 two-cylinder engine. A two-cylinder engine is a little bit more vibration by nature, has a little bit more vibration by nature than a four-cylinder engine. So you really don't feel it at the pegs, in part because you have the extra weight down here and because you have rubber foot pegs. You also have rubber foot pegs here for your passengers. So again, taking that vibes out of the bike a little bit through those foot pegs. And then the other interesting thing with the 650 that you see is the exhaust finishes right there. Now for emissions regulations, most of that stuff is done in the catalytic converter, which is down in the bottom there. You can kind of see it through there. So there's really no need for a pipe on many modern bikes. It's just about sound. The sound on this bike is fine. It just is what it is. It's not something that is legendary in sound. And you're going to find a little difference on the ZX4, but it does give you a pretty cool view of the swing arm over here, solid rear brakes as well. And again, rear brakes don't need to be fancy on just about any bike, because as the weight transfers, you're really just managing this wheel's traction more than, using it to really slow down the bike. So there's your quick view there. Let's do the exact same comparison over here on the ZX4. Because it's more race oriented, you don't want any weights on the bottom, you don't want any rubber padding, and again, that might make a difference in your comfort overall. Oops, let's try to go back this way. But one of the key differences here is that four-cylinder engine, again, is inherently smoother in its operation, so that might make a difference as well. But no luxuries here. You got your feelers there. When you lean this bike over, that's going to be touching before your feet do, so that's good there. And then you have a more traditional exhaust out here. So again, this might be something that you want to change up in the future. If you can, there'll be more options for this style of exhaust than there are for that. And this thing is an absolute screamer. It sounds fantastic. It's part of the fun of owning this bike. So we've gone through a lot of the technical differences between these two bikes, but if you have roughly $10,000 set aside for a $10,000 MSRP bike, which one is best for you? Well, this is an interesting one. The rest is going to be my opinion here based on someone who tests these bikes daily and who's ridden and owned bikes for years. I've had the 650 engine in the Versus 650. I've talked about that engine as being the perfect road bike. So let's just talk briefly about why you may want to ride this one. If you've always wanted a sport bike, this is still very much a sport bike. It is fun in the corners, it handles well, it's got great tires, adding the traction control was a key, but that torquey engine to me is very appealing. It allows you to sort of rev, it has good, whether it's top gear roll on or any gear roll on power, you kind of have that. This can feel more powerful than that one, especially in that roll on power. You just want to sort of give it the throttle and pass and do that. This one's very good. If your idea of riding is, several hours long, certainly you can commute on this. Any one of these can do short distance riding, but if you're gonna go several hours long, if you're gonna do charity rides with a group of friends, if you're gonna head out to the coast out here in New Brunswick and drive a couple hours out and a couple hours back, this is going to be an excellent choice for you. It is still very, very sporty. There are certain riders that can absolutely outperform each one depending on which one you have. So if you're on this one, you can outperform that bike. If you're on that bike, you can outperform this bike. If you're not going to the track, this is going to be a very solid bike for you. If you are going to the track but just doing it occasionally, this is also going to be a solid bike for you. If you have a few $100s in accessories that you want to spend on this one, you could customize it up with that USB port for your GPS. You could customize it with some luggage that you could put on that and this kind of thing. So this one to me is a very, very good all-around bike with a sporty nature. ZX4, it's less of an all-around bike. It's something you just need to recognize. Some people will say, oh, I'll never spend that much money on a 400cc bike. Okay, you can say that. To me, what I would say is, if you are into performance riding, this one is going to be better for you. It's got better suspension, it's got a better layout, it's got better front brakes, it's got, it's lighter weight. Now again, lighter weight is often good for a beginner rider. I wouldn't shy away from suggesting this for a beginner rider because it's more versatile over this. This is going to keep you a little bit more narrow focused. For a super sport bike, this is the most comfortable one. And frankly, if I'm buying a super sport bike, this is the only one I would buy. This is going to enhance your skills, and you will probably never, the average rider will probably never catch up to the limits of this bike and what it can do both on the track and on the street. But like I said, a little bit less comfortable than that one. Really not great for a passenger, and it's got that limitation that you have to decide if you're going to unlock it somehow in the future, which again, I don't even know how to do right now, but it is going to come with a little bit of a limit to the overall horsepower. The other thing you're going to find is you are going to have to shift to get power. This is not going to have roll-on power. You're going to have to keep it up higher in the revs, which is not an issue for reliability, but you are going to have to keep it up higher in the revs to maintain power to do things. There's a feel to riding a super sport that this one gives you. And what I like about this bike is something like the ZX-6R and ZX-10R, they're too much power for me to enjoy on the street. It's just, you really can only access the true potential of those bikes on the racetrack. Now that doesn't mean that a lot of people don't enjoy them on the street because they're very enjoyable on the street. But for me, this gives me all of that super sport package along with a power that's manageable on the street, and certainly, you can go well beyond legal speed, but you want to be aimed at overall performance if you're buying this bike and aimed at overall general riding on this bike. Both perform well, both are good. So I hope that helps you give an idea of which one's best for you, especially in that price class. But if you have questions, continue to let me know in the comments section, because there are only two of these bikes at Canada's largest volume Kawasaki dealer, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, here in New Brunswick. So there's one 4R and there's one 4RR. Once these are gone for this year, that's it for the videos on it. So that's why I tried to get as many in this week as I could. I'll continue to make more. We'll continue to do other videos and that kind of thing. And if you're interested in any of the other bikes, make sure you subscribe. Let me know. If you want this bike, it's available. I've heard that all over, customers from the States have been saying that they're sold out everywhere. If you're in Canada, this one's available. The 4RR is also available. Make sure you get your name on them right here. Make them yours. They are collector's bikes. They are going to be the kind of bike that, in my opinion, are going to hold their value really, really well, because they're going to be desirable bikes. So there you go. There's my quick review. It's Friday here. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll come back to you on Monday with more reviews. So we'll talk to you in the next one.